Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Gentlemen, we are in for a treat. And ladies, do not care what is in between your legs, believe me. Could not care less. I just care that you want to learn. It just, gentlemen, just kind of flows off the tongue. What was I saying? My name's Connor, preemptive like, original link to the video, top of the description, below that, link to the Discord. Click on it, sends you right over there. We'd love to have you. We are in for a treat here, okay? Epic History TV, my favorite channel. My favorite channel on YouTube. I don't want to be too hasty. Maybe I'm not thinking of a few. But, top 5. Easily my favorite. Look, there are a lot of great history channels. Kings and Generals, awesome. Baz Battles, pretty good. History March, great. Amazing maps, maybe the best maps. But I think that Epic History TV just has the whole package. And it's got amazing maps, amazing narration, amazing storytelling, presentation, the score, the sound. You feel like you're like in a movie theater, and it's like a little mini event. I could not give enough praise to this channel. I think it's the perfect history channel. And it's about HMS Victory, Admiral Nelson, and Napoleonic Wars, Warship. So many things I love. Channel I love. Topic I love. Let's go. I said my name's Connor. Hi. Original link, top description. Below that, Discord link. Love to have you. Pay attention. Phone's away. I tossed mine. Even if you're watching on a phone, throw it. That is no excuse. If you are not ready to learn, there's the door. You are definitely in the wrong class. Home ec is down the hall. Spaghetti. Hope you're all doing well. Let's learn.
HMS Victory. One of Britain's most powerful warships in an age when Britain dominated the seas. During the
Yeah, I spilt water. It'll dry out.
In an age when Britain dominated the seas. During the Napoleonic Wars, such ships were Britain's wooden walls, protecting the homeland from invasion, while devastating enemy commerce and protecting Allied shipping. Ships of the line were the largest and most sophisticated war machines of the conflict. Britain had around 140 in total, more than any other nation. But her advantage came less from numbers or better ship design than the qualities of the men who sailed them. Bold and experienced commanders,
Nelson,
disciplined and eager crews, all full of confidence and accustomed to victory.
I watched part 1.
This video is sponsored by War Thunder.
Please, guys, use their... I'm able to watch these amazing videos and react to them. Sometimes I even consider, like, copying and pasting their link for their sponsor in my description, but, like, it seems like, oh, that's a good thing, but that's just too far for me. I'm that's overstepping, and I don't want to do that. But if this game interests you and you heard it here, please use their link. It helps them out. Least we can do. They deserve it.
Comprehensive combined arms combat game ever made, with more than 2,000 vehicles, all modeled right down to their individual components. Take to land, sky, or sea to wage intense PvP battles on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. War Thunder's huge range of vehicles spans more than a century of military history, and you can customize the game experience to suit your taste: fast arcade action or greater tactical realism. War Thunder has one of the most sophisticated damage systems around, with X-ray cameras revealing the precise impact of weapons on crews and vehicle components. Above all, we love War Thunder's destructible environments and explosions, all in incredible, detailed 4K resolution. Play War Thunder now using the link in our video description. New players will receive a large free bonus pack, including premium vehicles, premium account, boosters, and more. Thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video.
Dang it, I used to be able to do it.
At the height of the Napoleonic Wars, around 145,000 men served in Britain's Royal Navy, a number comparable to European field armies of the period. Ships of the line, like HMS Victory, required huge crews, not so much to sail her, as to man her heavy guns. At the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, she had 820 men aboard, a little short of her full complement of 850. Just 15 of these men were commissioned officers, 1 admiral commanding the fleet, 1 captain in command of the ship, 9 naval lieutenants, and 4 Royal Marine officers. Then the senior warrant officers, and 1 captain in command of the ship.
So there's the top guy is the one in charge of the whole kind of
admiral commanding the fleet.
Of the fleet. Then you have a captain of the individual.
1 captain in command of the ship.
Okay, so even on the flagship, you still have a captain and a vice captain.
9 naval lieutenants.
First lieutenant. Okay.
And 4 Royal Marine officers. Then the senior warrant officers, including the ship's master in charge of navigation, the gunner, responsible for the ship's guns, small arms, powder, and shot, the bosun, responsible for sails and rigging, and who with his mates oversaw all work on deck. 2 ship's carpenters, responsible for keeping the ship afloat and making repairs. The purser, in charge of ship's provisions, a surgeon for the crew.
So if a leak started, so obviously, like, they're always, wooden ships, they're not going to be perfect. They're always going to leak some, right? And so you're always going to have to pump or bail some out. But when there's like a hole opened up, I'm sure they just like plug it with a piece of wood. But what about like a cannon blast below the water line? I mean, how do you...
Crew's physical welfare and a of ship's provisions, a surgeon for the crew's physical welfare, and a chaplain for their spiritual. Victory also had 21 midshipmen. These were young cadet officers, some of whom began their naval careers at just 13. They served a 6-year apprenticeship at sea, learning seamanship, sail handling, navigation, mathematics, and trigonometry. They'd then be qualified to sit the lieutenant's exam, a rigorous assessment by a board of naval captains. Further promotion to commander, then captain, would depend on merit and, crucially, social and political connections. The process could be hugely
if those first cadet, like the young officers, young boys in training, I'm sure we're from more higher up classes. What would happen if they continued to fail and fail and fail the tests to go up in the ranks? Like he's from a rich aristocratic family, and from a little child is in the officer school, but he's just not smart enough become a lower role. Or
frustrating for the political connections. The process could be hugely frustrating for those without influential friends, as satirized in this cartoon by the famous illustrator George Cruikshank. Some naval officers came from aristocratic families, but most were from what today we'd call the middle classes. HMS Victory carried 43 clerks, orderlies, stewards, and servants to assist the officers. 69 junior warrant officers, petty officers, and their mates held various specialist roles, such as coxswain, armourer, and sailmaker. There were 212 able seamen, the veteran sailors. 193 ordinary seamen with at least a year's service, 87 landsmen, mostly new recruits, only good for hauling on ropes, 142 Royal Marine non-commissioned officers and privates, soldiers who fought at sea, led amphibious landings, and enforced discipline.
I said cool map, cool painting.
Soldiers who fought at sea, led amphibious landings, and enforced discipline. And 31 ship's boys, many of them orphans plucked from destitution, now destined for a life at sea. Each man was assigned a station for every maneuver. Top men were the fittest, bravest sailors who handled the sails high above deck. Forecastle men were knowledgeable veterans who handled anchors and bowsprit sails. The wasters in the ship's waist and afterguard on the quarterdeck and poop were for hauling on ropes. The crew was organized into two halves, the larboard watch and starboard watch. They took turns on and off duty, except for emergencies when all hands were called on deck. They were further organized into divisions, each commanded by a lieutenant responsible for his men's welfare and conduct. HMS Victory's crew, like that of most British warships, was surprisingly cosmopolitan. Most were from Britain,
America. Privateering or
and Ireland, but about cosmopolitan. Most were from Britain and Ireland.
One Isle of Man.
But about 10% were foreigners, including Americans, Italians, Dutch, Maltese, and West Indians. About half were volunteers. The rest had been impressed, meaning they'd been forced into militaries.
That's the term, impressment.
Service by the Navy's notorious press gangs. These naval recruitment parties scoured ports and passing ships for British sailors, all of whom were considered fair game for compulsory enlistment.
I heard that, I'm pausing a lot, but I'll try not to. I heard that like during the American Revolution, or maybe like after the American Revolution, but before the War of 1812, like because back then someone from America or the colonies and someone from Britain would have very similar accents, so it's not going to be like, oh, obviously he's American, he talks like I'm talking. But I heard that was a lot like being like Americans like captured a ship, an American ship captured by the British. They would just like be like, nope, we're taking you, and then you'd impressment. They'd make you work.
The process was not always entirely peaceful.
I could be wrong.
Navy press gangs were feared and despised by civilians. They were known to seize men who were not sailors or even British.
Young Thomas was
civilians. They were known to seize men who were not sailors or even British, though most were later released if they could prove their identity. And there were limits. Contrary to popular myth, the Navy did not press vagrants, nor did it accept criminals convicted of serious crimes. To get the best out of a ship like Victory, the captain had to know his crew and his ship. Every vessel has its own best point of sailing relative to the wind. HMS Victory's was 1 or 2 points off her stern. This vessel has its own best point and his ship. Every vessel has its own best point of sailing relative to the wind. HMS Victory's was 1 or 2 points off her stern. This means she made her best speed, around 10 knots, sailing in these directions.
Why would each ship have such different these things? If they're all if the sails aren't the sails usually standard on the ships, so wouldn't
But large ships do not sail in a straight line due to leeway, the effect of the wind pushing the ship's hull sideways. This was something the helmsman steering the ship at the ship's wheel had to correct for. The officer of the watch, usually a lieutenant, was responsible for the ship when on duty and ordered which sails to set and take in. He would summon the captain if the situation required it. In strong winds, Victory might sail under topsails alone, perhaps with a jib and flying jib. In lighter winds, she would crowd on sail, adding courses, topgallantsails and royals. She might even run out the stunsail booms to set studding sails, pronounced stunsails. This was known as sailing large. But if the wind picked up, stunsails and royals had to be brought in quickly, as spars and sails could be damaged or torn away by a sudden strong gust. No sailing ship by a sudden quickly, as spars and sails could be damaged or torn away by a sudden strong gust.
But why would they be any more vulnerable to strong gusts with more than wouldn't it be that if you have less sails up, that they would, how would that, you know what I mean? Why is it that more sails up means more dangerous for them to break in a gust?
No sailing ship can sail directly into the wind. Victory's closest point of sail was 6 points off the wind. This was known as sailing close-hauled or on a bowline. There were two methods of sailing against the wind. The first was tacking. This zigzag approach required precise sail handling and could strain spars and rigging.
I remember doing that in sailing camp.
The alternative was wearing ship, an easier maneuver to perform, but slower, as it meant going the long way around. Anchoring a large warship like Victory was also a complex operation. The sea's depth was discovered by casting the lead, literally throwing a lead weight tied to a rope into the sea. The rope clearly marked every fathom, or 6 feet. The preferred depth for anchoring...
Well, they would have to measure the depth when they're perfectly stationary, like anchored, right? Because if you try to measure the depth when you're moving, then it's gonna like go in a diagonal and be longer than it actually would be if it went straight.
Anchoring was 40 fathoms or less. The preferred depth for anchoring was 40 fathoms or less, though it was possible in deeper water. First, the ship reduced speed by taking in sail. When the ship came to a halt, the anchor was let go, with a marker buoy attached. As current and backed sails began to drive the ship sternwards, the anchor cable was run out, using 3 times the length needed to reach the sea bottom. It was the weight of this giant cable, as much as the anchor, that kept the ship in position. Depending on weather, tide, and sea bottom.
So I wonder what weighed more, all of the rope or the anchor itself. Probably the anchor. I mean, oh, I don't know.
Depending on weather, tide, and sea bottom, it might be necessary to set several of Victory's anchors to keep the ship safely moored. A less well-known inshore maneuver was kedging. This was a way to drag the ship against wind or tide using manpower alone. The lighter kedge anchor was carried in a ship's boat, rowed out ahead of the ship, and let go. The crew then turned the capstan to haul the ship towards the anchor. This exhausting process was repeated as many times as necessary to move the ship into position. Another version of this was warping.
And I'd imagine that would really dig the anchor into the seabed.
In which ropes were attached to a fixed object, like a strong tree on shore, and the ship hauled towards it.
Wait,
towards it. Another version of this was warping, in which ropes were attached to a fixed object, like a strong tree on shore, and the ship hauled towards it.
How? Oh, like in the same, all the guys, so so it's attached to the same thing that they pull up the anchor with, and so they're pulling it with that same thing?
In naval combat, the first consideration was always the direction and strength of the wind. A ship upwind or to windward had the advantage and was said to have the weather gauge. She could choose if and when to initiate battle, while the ship to leeward had to struggle into the wind to reach her adversary. Ships of all nations sometimes flew a false flag, that of another nation, to hide their identity. This was considered fair practice, but to fire on an enemy without first hoisting your true colors was an unpardonable crime. When about to engage the enemy, the captain would order, "Beat to quarters." To the rattle of the Marines' drums, the ship was cleared for action. All temporary cabins on gun decks were dismantled and taken to the hold, so gun crews could work without obstruction. The sick bay was cleared away and all its patients carried down to the orlop deck. The galley stove was put out to reduce the risk of fire, and ammunition was moved up from the magazines to the gun decks.
I wonder how long that took.
The ship's boats were launched and towed behind the ship. Here they were less likely to be smashed to splinters by enemy fire, and were immediately ready for any emergency.
Smart.
Sand was poured on the deck for traction, while splinter netting was put up above the decks to protect men from any falling spars or pulleys shot down by enemy fire. Every man...
Why didn't they use that in the gun decks? Because wasn't the main cause of death from cannonballs the splinters that it shot, the splinters that it created and that it projected? You know, it went through the hull of the ship and the splinters flew everywhere in the hull and killed people. What if they put a net system there too? Obviously it's not going to stop a cannonball, but it could stop deflected shards of wood, right?
And then took up his station for battle. Captain and officers in full uniform on the quarterdeck. Topmen aloft, ready to trim sail. Sharpshooters on the fighting tops. Carpenter's crew on the orlop deck, ready to plug holes below the waterline. Gunner's mates in the magazine, filling extra cartridges. The surgeon in the cockpit, ready to receive casualties. For 3/4 of the crew, battle stations meant the gun decks, manning one of the ship's 104 guns.
So the guns tend to be larger, like higher caliber, the lower you go down in the ship, right? Because of, you don't want to make, you want to put your heaviest guns at the bottom of the ship to make it bottom heavy so it doesn't tip, obviously. So isn't that true? So like the largest projectile, biggest guns were lower and lighter as you went up. Guys, please tell me if anything I say is completely wrong.
It was a huge amount of firepower for the age, and made her one of the most heavily armed warships in the world. Her heaviest cannon were the 32-pounders of the lower gun deck. At point-blank range, these guns could punch through 2 feet of solid oak. Heavy breaching ropes held each gun in place. Otherwise, recoil would have sent 4 tons of gun and carriage flying across the deck after every shot. Each gun had a crew of between 10 and 14, which was divided in half if the ship needed to fire on both sides.
10 and 14. Oh.
Each crew was led by a gun captain. He was responsible for aiming the gun, his crew shifting its massive weight with handspikes, crowbars, and wedges. When he was on target, the gun captain either applied a slow match to the touch hole, or, as seen here, pulled a lanyard attached to a gun lock to fire the gun.
So he aims it, tells them where to aim it, and fires it. What do the other 7 to 11 people do? It's like a giant floating shotgun.
To reload, one man first blocked the vent with his thumb or a stopper to prevent sparks getting into the barrel during loading.
Good idea.
The barrel was then sponged to extinguish embers and wormed to remove debris. A gunpowder cartridge was inserted at the muzzle.
Wouldn't the sponge already clear the debris?
A gunpowder cartridge was inserted at the muzzle and rammed home with a ramrod, followed by the shot, and then...
Question, guys. What would... I'm assuming they try... What would happen if you just put, like, 3 or 4 cannonballs in? Like, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, would something go wrong? I'm sure they thought of that, and it's something's not right good about it. But wouldn't it just, like, shoot all 4 of them out? I don't mean like a buckshot or whatever they call it. I just mean like a boom, 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 boom.
To keep everything in place. The gun was run out into firing position and a pricker inserted into the vent to prick the cartridge and spill the gunpowder. The gun captain then added powder from his powder horn to the vent and priming pan. The gun was now primed, ready to fire again. This process took an experienced British gun crew around 90 seconds, and they were generally faster and more accurate than their adversaries. As a battle wore on, the firing rate would fall dramatically due to exhaustion and casualties.
Do you guys think in the Napoleonic Wars that... Do you think that Britain's Navy was more superior to the French Navy, more so than the French Army, Land Army, was superior to the British Land Army? Does that make sense?
Conditions on a gun deck during battle must have been horrendous. Noise, smoke, sweat, and gruesome wounds caused by shot, flying wooden splinters, and accidents. Battles usually began with a broadside, a ship firing all guns on one side in quick succession. For greater impact, the first broadside could be double-shotted, every gun loaded with 2 rounds.
Jesus! Thank you again.
To guarantee penetration of an enemy ship's hull, the range should be less than 500 yards. Many captains preferred extreme close range to fight yardarm to yardarm. The deadliest maneuver was to rake the enemy, to fire a broadside into their stem or stern. round shot would smash its way the length of the ship, dealing death and mayhem as it went.
I was gonna say that makes it harder to hit the ship though, but yeah, I was gonna say something. Oh yeah, like right here. Oh, so I'm at 1831. I've learned a bit through some videos about Cochrane. Forget his first name. Johnny Cochrane. James Cochrane. He was a British naval officer, and he was stuck. Like he was kind of insubordinate, and officers didn't really like him, so they pushed him away to head a not great ship, like a small ship called HMS Speedy. But what he would do is he would like go against much larger ships and then just go right beside them, point blank range, and because HMS Speedy was so short and smaller than the ones that Cochrane would pray after, the shots would just go right over the Speedy, and the Speedy would just blast right into the ship.
Fire round shot mayhem as it went. French ships tended to fire high, on the uproll, aiming for masts and rigging to immobilize the enemy.
From range,
British
not a
ships
bad
aimed
idea.
low, for the hull, trying to knock out guns and crew. At long range, a mile or more, round shot could be skipped across the sea, like skimming pebbles across a pond. Round shot, a solid iron ball, was the most commonly used type of ammunition. Specialist ammunition, such as bar shot, also known as double-headed shot or chain shot, was used to target masts and rigging.
A giant dumbbell.
At close range, grape shot and canister,
Grape
both
shot, that's what I was thinking.
packed with multiple smaller projectiles, turned a gun or carronade into a giant shotgun and were used to wreak havoc on an enemy deck.
Oh my god, imagine if they did a broadside at close range with every cannon loaded with grape shot. Because the ship is already a floating shotgun with the singular shots because of all the cannons. So that would be insane.
A captain might decide to finish the fight by boarding an enemy warship. Designated boarders armed themselves with muskets, pistols, cutlasses, and half-pikes.
Why not grenades? Do they have grenades? Oh, that'd be the perfect boarding. I mean, I guess it'd be... Yeah, grenades. They definitely had grenades. Or a type of grenade, just like swing like they do in the movies over the ship and just drop grenades. Or just throw grenades. Or... I don't know.
The enemy ship was bound tight by grappling hooks, and after a shower of grenados and stink pots...
Sorry, even better idea. They should, while the fight is all going and everyone's... They should always have one lifeboat, like, on the opposite side of the fighting action of the ship, and load it with explosives and gunpowder. And while the action's going on, yeah, you might get found out and seen and shot or whatever, but just go around to the other side of the enemy ship and light it, and kaboom.
An early form of tear gas, the border shower of grenados and stink tight by grappling hooks. And after a shower of grenados and stink pots, an early form of tear gas, the boarders would swarm across to the enemy deck. In such actions, morale, aggression, and momentum counted more than tactics. Though brutal, such battles were usually over quickly.
I think I'd rather be shot than stabbed. Well, depends. All hands ahoy. Traditional wake-up call of the bosun's mates. Life at sea. Guys, I have to pee really bad. I'll be right back. Okay, I'll wash my hands.
Combat at sea was relatively rare. Great fleet actions such as Trafalgar and the Nile were rarer still, just a handful of days spread across 20 years of war.
Okay.
Weeks and months often lay between any encounter with the enemy. Then life at sea was dominated by naval routine, and the passage of time marked by the ship's bell. The naval day began at noon, determined by the officers' observation of the sun with their sextants. The moment the sun reached its highest point was noon. The ship's hourglass was turned, and the bell rung 8 times to mark the beginning of the afternoon watch. Half an hour later, as determined by a half-hour sandglass, the bell was rung once. A half hour later, it was rung twice, and so on.
How do they know? I'm going to sound stupid. How do they know how much sand to put in? Never mind.
A half hour later, it was rung twice, and so on. So 5 bells in the afternoon watch was 2:30 p.m. 8 bells meant the start of a new watch, sending half the crew below deck to rest or do other tasks, and bringing the other half on duty. There were 7 watches in all, though the first and second dog watches were only 2 hours long. This meant the 2 halves of the crew switched their routine each day, and one half wasn't always stuck with the same night watches. Senior officers slept in a hanging cot. For everyone else, bed was a hammock strung up from the ship's beams. Most of the men slept on the middle or lower gun decks, their hammocks suspended between the guns, just 16 inches apart.
I would honestly prefer a hammock to a stationary bed, because I feel like for sleeping on a boat, like the hammock is just the best option, because you're kind of like, you don't always have to go up and down and all the movement with the ship.
But as most ships operated a 2-watch system, half the crew on duty while the other half slept, about half the hammocks were empty at any given time. In normal conditions, only part of the watch was required to sail the ship. The rest carried out various tasks, not least cleaning the ship, scrubbing decks, polishing brass, and painting woodwork. This was a matter of maintenance and hygiene, as well as collective pride in their ship's appearance. The crew were fed 3 times daily, though only dinner at noon was a hot meal. They organized
When did the word lunch come in?
themselves into messes, a hot meal. They organized themselves into messes of about 8 men, each taking his turn to fetch cooked food from the galley, which was eaten at a table suspended between the guns. Naval food wasn't fancy, but it was sufficient, even for men engaged in long hours of hard labor. Apart from the ship's substantial stores of salted beef, pork, and ship's biscuit, the ship took on fresh meat, including livestock, fresh vegetables, and water at every fresh meat stores of salted beef, pork, and ship's biscuit. The ship took on fresh meat, including livestock, fresh vegetables, and water at every possible opportunity.
Did they ever fish? Like, when was the first fishing rod? Like, did they ever leave the first, like, did they ever just, like, leave hooks dangling on the boat?
Most of the crew probably ate better at sea than they would have in civilian life. As well as the daily routine dictated.
I hear in like the U.S. Navy today that the submarine, the submarine crews get the best lunch. Like they purposely put the greatest meals for any soldier. They give them to the ones who are serving on submarines, because if you're going to be in those cramped, dark conditions, no sunlight underwater for months, then it's going to be hard on your brain. And so they give them the best food. And so I'm wondering if there was a similar.
Rated by the ship's bell, there were weekly rituals. Clothes and hammocks washed and hung out to dry once a week, weather permitting. Gunnery practice by divisions.
With real ammo? Wouldn't that waste?
And on Sundays, a church service led by the ship's chaplain, if there was one, or the captain. This was followed, at least once a month, by a public reading of the Articles of War, the regulations that governed conduct and discipline at
all commanders, captains, officers, in and belonging to any of His Majesty's ships or vessels of war shall cause the public worship of Almighty God according to the liturgy of the Church of England established by law to be solemnly, orderly, and reverently performed in their respective ships, and shall take care that prayers and preaching by the chaplains and holy orders of the respective ships be performed diligently, and that the Lord's Day be observed according to law, swearing, drunkenness, scandalous actions, etc. All flag officers and all persons in or belonging to His Majesty's ships or vessels of war being guilty of profane oaths, cursings, execrations, drunkenness, uncleanness, or other scandalous actions in derogation of God's honor and corruption of good manners shall incur such punishment as a court-martial shall think fit to impose, keel hauling, and as the nature and degree of their offense shall deserve.
sea. The articles listed 36 offenses, from drunkenness to theft, mutiny.
If any officer, mariner, soldier, or other person of the fleet shall give, hold, or entertain intelligence to or with any enemy or rebel without leave from the King's Majesty or the Lord High Admiral or the commissioners for executing the office of Lord High Admiral, Commander in Chief, or his commanding officer, every such person so offending and being thereof convicted by the sentence of a court-martial shall be punished with death.
Cowardice and striking an officer. Half of these were punishable by death.
If any letter of message from any enemy or rebel be conveyed to any officer, mariner, or soldier or other in the fleet, and the said officer, mariner, or soldier, or other as aforesaid shall not, within 12 hours, having opportunity so to do, acquaint his superior or commanding officer, or if any superior officer, being acquainted therewith, shall not, in convenient time, reveal the same to the commander-in-chief of the squadron, every such person so offending and being convicted thereof, by the sentence of the court-martial shall be punished with death, or such honor punishment as nature and degree of the offense shall deserve, and the court-martial shall impose. Interesting how keeping information and that could be helpful and giving away compromisable information to enemies both carry the same penalty. Interesting.
In several cases, it was the only sentence allowed.
I like reading these. All spies and all persons whatsoever who shall come or be found in the nature of spies to bring, let me guess, death, or deliver any seducing letters or messages from any enemy or rebel, or endeavor to corrupt any captain, officer, mariner, or other in the fleet to betray his trust, being convicted of any such offense by blah, 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 will be killed, I'm sure.
British discipline at sea was notoriously severe.
Keel haul.
Crimes for which a sailor was not hanged would usually lead to a flogging with the cat o' nine tails. Drunkenness was the most common offence, not unconnected to the Navy's daily allowance of a gallon of beer per man in home
And I'm sure things people did when drunk.
waters, or half a pint of rum or other spirits overseas. This
I gotta shut up.
connected to the Navy's daily allowance of a gallon was the most common offence, not unconnected to the Navy's daily allowance of a gallon of beer per man in home waters, or half a pint of rum or other spirits overseas. This, mixed 4 parts water to 1 part spirits, with lemon or lime juice added to prevent scurvy, was the famous Navy grog.
Really?
Any man caught drunk or asleep on duty might get 12 lashes, delivered by a boatswain's mate in front of the assembled crew. Serious crimes, such as desertion, might result in 200 lashes or more.
Which would probably kill you from infection.
A punishment so severe, it sometimes killed the prisoner.
Jesus. I've been calling
Some naval captains were
I have not seen this video, all right? No pre-watchers.
ferocious, times killed the prisoner. Some naval captains were ferocious tyrants, but most knew that harsh punishment was best used sparingly. British sailors did not expect an easy life, but did expect to be treated fairly and with dignity. If not, there could be trouble. In 1797, the Royal
Batavian Republic.
Navy experienced In 1797, the Royal Navy experienced a large-scale mutiny at Spithead, affecting 16 ships of the line. It was effectively a strike for better pay, as sailors hadn't had a pay rise in more than a century. The mutiny was settled without violence, and the sailors largely got what they wanted. A second mutiny at the Nore made more radical demands, with some crews threatening to defect to France. This time, the authorities were determined to set an example, and hanged 29 ringleaders.
It's like once you see, one people get what they want, and then the next people ask for more, then, all right, now no leniency.
Despite hard discipline and service,
Thank you, Ludix7. This has been an awesome video.
British Navy produced crews that were experienced and able, bound together by long service at sea. Men that bold commanders knew they could rely on. The British Navy, well-manned, well-resourced, and backed by a powerful economy, was able to secure complete naval dominance during the Napoleonic Wars. It would prove a crucial factor in Napoleon's defeat. HMS Victory, a factor was HMS Victory, having played her part, was placed in the Naval Reserve at the end of the war.
Hey, Portsmouth Harbor. That's right there. There actually is a town called Portsmouth right next to me. Because apparently no town in New England has an original name. It's just taken from towns from England somehow, for some reason.
Narrowly escaping the breaker's yard, she became the flagship of the Port Admiral of Portsmouth on England's south coast, and later flagship of the Royal Navy's Commander-in-Chief. After a major refit, Victory began a new life as a museum ship, opening to the public in 1928.
And now the USS Constitution is the oldest floating commissioned warship, I think.
Today, she is undergoing another major conservation project to deal with the many challenges faced by a 250-year-old wooden sailing ship.
If you replace every board...
It will ensure her survival far into the future, as a unique memorial to this dramatic age of naval warfare. It will ensure her survival of naval warfare. Thank you to Royal Museums Greenwich for help in collating images for this video.
Thanks.
Greenwich in southeast London has been at the centre of British naval history for centuries, and is an essential visit for anyone with an interest in our maritime past.
Ooh, look at that grass. You guys have great grass over there. Perfect climate. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. Not too much sun, and you get a lot of rain. That is perfect for great grass. I love good grass.
There you can visit the Royal Observatory, home of the Greenwich Meridian, the legendary clipper ship Cutty Sark, and the National Maritime Museum. Their galleries tell the story of Britain's long connection to the sea.
Nope.
A tale of exploration,
Nope.
empire, trade and military power. Among the many highlights of the collection, the uniform Vice Admiral Nelson was wearing when he was killed at the Battle of Trafalgar.
Does it still have the bullet hole, or was he shot in the face? No, he wasn't. I really hope they didn't repair it in any way. I hope they left any blood stains on.
If you love maritime history, make sure you make a visit next time you're in town.
I will. Is that a mermaid lion? A merlion?
Thank you also to Jack Fine Art and the estate of Derek Gardner for permission to use his paintings in this series. You can view many more of his fantastic artworks via the links in the description. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video.
Use the link.
Dive into the most comprehensive combined arms combat game ever made using the link in our video description, with a big free bonus pack for new players.
Thanks, Letix Heaven, for the video. Love you, buddy. Awesome. I love this channel so much. Great video. I'd appreciate any questions answered that I had in the comments. And I love you guys. Hope you're doing well. Really do. If not, don't worry. Deep breath. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me now. If you are not okay right now, you will be fine. Don't worry. We're all human. Just enjoy the day. Forget anything that's wrong. And have a good one. All right, guys? Bye.